Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Latinaly podcast. Today's conversation is for the women who feel disconnected from her body, her voice, her intuition, or maybe even herself. Because the truth is, so many of us have learned how to survive, but we were never taught how to feel safe inside of our own bodies. We learned how to push through, how to stay strong, how to keep going, but not how to come back to ourselves after life, love, trauma, or survival pulled us away. Today we're talking about healing, and not the pretty version, not the Instagram version, but the real one. The slow, non-linear, deeply human process of coming back home to yourself. And to have this discussion, I am joined by Kathy Williams, a trailblazer in the world of body-based healing and creative arts therapy. As an award-winning author, trainer, and facilitator, Kathy is the founder of Intuitive Self, where her workshops, courses, and one-on-one sessions help individuals connect with their intuitive wisdom, reconnect to their bodies, and help their inner strength. Known for her empowering, compassionate approach, Kathy supports women to rekindle their relationship with their bodies and relearn how to listen to, trust in, and follow their own intuition. So wherever you are, let's take a breath. Settle in, because this conversation is meant to meet you exactly where you are. Kathy Williams, welcome to the Latinaly podcast. I am so thrilled to have you on today.
Yay!
So it is such an honor to have you on the show, and everything that we're going to talk about today is going to resonate with so many people, and I just feel like it's so needed. And your work focuses on helping people heal and bridging the connection to their intuition, their body, and their strength. And you've been doing this for 17 years of pouring into other people. Who are you behind all of it, behind pouring into everyone else's cup? And how do you find time to pour into your own cup when you're gifting all of these women and all of these people this wonderful healing? How do you give back to yourself?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. And knowing how to answer who am I, I feel like so much of my work is driven by connection, deeply wanting to encourage women to connect to themselves, but really appreciating the connection that comes when women come together, when we are in dialogue, when we are in circle, when we are able to meet all different parts of ourselves and feel really seen and heard. And I feel very lucky that all of these interactions fill my cup up. They're rejuvenating for me to be in those spaces.
When you are helping other people, that is a fulfillment for you, and it pours into your own cup. And it it's so hard to pour into your own cup when you are, or really when your whole life's work is giving to other people, because helping people heal is a huge service. And sometimes maybe you can forget about yourself in those moments because you are pouring into other people so often. And in that fulfillment of work, when you come home, how do you feel? How do you reset? How do you bring the fire back in? Or even how do you just allow yourself a soft moment to maybe not bring that work home if you do bring it home with you?
Mm. It's been such a fascinating journey as my work has evolved and my self-awareness has grown with that process. So I know with hindsight now, I can look back and see that my pattern in those early years when I was first starting out was very much in a habit of overgiving, wanting
Mm.
to give and to share. And admittedly that comes from my own experiences of not having people be there for me in the way that I needed them.
Mm.
So I almost felt this moral obligation to show up in the way for others that I didn't have myself. But with a lot of my own, self-awareness and my own practices, I've learned and understood that, oh, I was trying to fill a void in my own support system through my overgiving. And I really hear you on these habits that we can form and create, where we can overgive, or we can be in a pattern where we don't make time for ourselves, where, especially when living in a Western society where it is seen as selfish to take care of one's needs and prioritize ourselves, particularly as women, where we naturally fall in those caregiver roles to our parents, our friends, our children, our partner. What has sustained me and been able to make really grounded impact for my day to day is these practices that I use with clients, I use for myself. They have become my practices first and foremost. So, all of the movement rituals, the journaling practices, the expressive art ways that I take sacred moments to be with self. I'm not always as disciplined as I would like to be with this practice, but I always return to it. And I guess the reason why my work is so replenishing is that when I'm holding space, whether that's one on one or whether I'm in a group scenario and I'm facilitating a journey for someone, I'm reminding myself of these philosophies and these practices as I'm facilitating and as I'm speaking. And it's almost like a little marker of being like, oh yeah, when was the last time you journaled? It's been a couple of days.
Mm.
So it is definitely a practice that I advocate for, to even just in small moments check in with oneself and learn ways that we can give more self-compassion rather than guilt when we do,
Mm-hmm.
and make these practices more self-sustaining so that we can show up in the world the way that we want to.
Wow. I love that. It's so important when you're working with other people, and just to have a check-in with yourself. And like you said, you can kind of, I mean, forget about yourself in those moments, but it's a nice reminder to have, to make sure that you come home and you say, okay, it's me time now. I need to make sure that I'm okay and I'm grounded, so then I can show up for other people while still showing up for myself. And I really want to get into some of those practices that you mentioned, but you said something about awareness, and having that awareness when you're working with your clients. And there's often a disconnect that a lot of women feel, and I think a lot of women don't even realize that they have this disconnect. And so when they don't realize that they have this disconnect, they don't have the language to place it. So what would you say would be the language to describe what that disconnection feels like emotionally, physically, and spiritually?
Mm. My experience of disconnection and my awareness of how disconnected I had become really came when I recognized how much I was trying to fill my time. So I was so busy, I was being overproductive, I didn't give myself any space. And I recognized that I purposely didn't give myself any space, because when I finally sat down on the couch and recognized, oh, I'm so tired. I My mind is overloaded. That there's a real exhaustion happening here. And it was almost like, if I paused or stood still for one moment, I was too afraid of the overwhelm that can happen when all of those feelings that I had been ignoring, all of the uncomfortable emotional states that I had been trying to bypass or suppress, would come to light. So I wonder, for other women, different ways that they might recognize that they're doing the same. So whether that's, not making any time at all for themselves and making excuses. So that mind chatter, that self talk of, oh no, I can't, I don't have the time for it. Or, oh no, that's silly to make time for myself. It's really interesting, these little comments and how they can come up and create patterns of disconnection. I recognized also the ways that I was really looking to numb or distract myself from heavy feelings. And, I never was encouraged or shown ways to healthily feel feelings that were rising in my body. So anything that felt out of the ordinary just was like a no-go zone. It's like, oh no,
Mhm.
sadness is coming up, suppress it. Anger's rising, don't show it. Um, and a lot of that was, through comments from my external world, whether that's parents or teachers or, adults when I was growing up. But I also recognized that that then became the way that I spoke to myself. So those words that I heard then became my own inner dialogue. So for me, it was really recognizing much later on in life, oh, what am I afraid is going to happen if I was to sit on that couch, if I was to put that work that is, top priority, if I just leave it for a night. um, and looking for evidence that things weren't going to come crashing down around me, that things were going to be okay if I took that time just to rest, just to be. And, we can talk about it, but it's quite difficult to retrain and repattern these ways of thinking and these ways of talking to ourselves.
Yeah, it's so crazy that you said that because I just saw a video the other day and it was of a mom and she was, doing something really hastily and she was just it was like she was in a rush and then she stopped and she said this is not an emergency and she moved a little slower. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like that is me. I am her." Because it's almost like if I don't hurry up and rush and it's almost like my whole world is going to come crashing down. And so what I've been doing is I've been saying this is not an emergency. I need to
Mm,
just slow and steady pace and it nothing has to be done at this very moment or I don't need to feel like I have the whole world kind of weighing on my shoulders and if I don't do it it's not going to get done because then it kind of creates this really almost self-sabotaging chaotic cycle that you go through and
yes.
then you realize that you're kind of drowning in this chaos and you don't even know how you got there. And when I saw that video I was just like it's okay to take a beat. It's okay to just take a minute. Like my son doesn't have to put on his shoes in 2 seconds for us to get out the door. It's okay that we're gonna maybe be a minute late. And that just removing that added pressure from
Yes.
ourselves and
How can we
just
take the pressure off ourselves?
yeah, how do we give ourselves a little bit more grace because the
Mm,
world isn't going to give it to us, so I think we just need to find ways to give it to ourselves. And yes, if we're lucky enough to have a partner that allows us or holds space for us to do that, that's wonderful too, but not many of us do.
yeah.
And it's so important to prioritize yourself and to prioritize your healing as a woman, as a mother, just as a person in general, almost as though healing is a luxury that like it's like I it's this almost unobtainable kind of thing. And when in fact healing and giving yourself a moment or sitting with yourself or journaling should really just be the bare minimum of making sure that your nervous system is in in rest or in check or you're not constantly wired. I feel like that's how I feel all the time, like I'm just on edge all the time. And I think that so many women feel this and they can't place why they feel it. But
Mm,
like you said, in packing your schedule, you're too busy to notice and you're you're too overwhelmed to even sit with the emotions because you're so busy, you have so many things to do. I it's and it's so important to just make time to make sure that you're good and so that your mind is right. And that is so when you have clients that feel this way, or when you have clients that feel maybe sort of numb, what is your suggestion of what would be the first step, or the first gentle step for someone who doesn't really know how to go about healing or reconnection, because it is kind of scary and we don't really know, how to do it? What would be the first gentle step that you would give to someone to start
Mm.
achieving that healing?
Thank you for that question, because it's such an overwhelming, it can be such an overwhelming place to find ourselves, and have these moments where we recognize, okay, something has to change. I can't keep on going at this rapid pace that's creating chaos, and I can't seem to catch a break. I'm not taking a beat at all. um, but then knowing where to begin and how to sift through all of the external shame and guilt that a woman gets when we try to take a moment for ourselves and try to do some work on ourselves in order to show up for ourselves and everyone else around us. One of the starting places for me when clients first come to me is getting them to take a moment on the couch or standing up to recognize what's happening in their body in this moment. And the simple nature of this is that most of the time we are so in our minds and there is a rapid dialogue. So I start with this curiosity as to what's happening. What is your mind saying at this moment? Is it saying, oh my God, this is so ridiculous. I don't have time to take a breath and be with my body? Is your mind so frantic that you actually don't recognize that you're standing up and you've got some numbness in your fingers, for
Mm.
example? So this cerebral noticing and the somatic check-in is a really beautiful way to gently begin, knowing that there is nothing that people need to do or be in that moment, but we're just noticing, we're acknowledging, and we're not judging ourselves, because we are so quick to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, there's no right or wrong in this process. We're just noticing what's happening. And I get really curious as to what that self talk is, what that dialogue is, but also what resistance there is to that somatic check in. So maybe there is a really rapid dialogue happening in the mind, and there's a heaviness in the body, but there's not much else. So, again, depending on that sort of feedback and what's happening with the client, I'll then quite intuitively take it from there. So maybe they'll begin to notice something that's happening in their body. And I'll just gently guide them to see if they want to go further with that. So maybe they're noticing a particular sensation, and we're just taking a really intentional, sacred moment to be with that sensation. Okay, so, you're feeling a little bit of heat on the chest. What does that have a color? Do you want to place your hand on that? Is that spreading? Is it getting bigger or smaller as we notice it? And that somatic check-in might not be something that they've ever done before, or they don't make time to do. And bringing that awareness not only to their mind, which is probably very loud, but also to their feeling body and their felt sense, that's when we can start to unnumb that connection.
Wow. And I have to be very honest with you, I've never heard of somatic healing in my life. And the way you just described it is so clear, and it's really incredible because it we are so often said that a lot of your healing and a lot of, everything that you do is in the mind only, and your practices bring it to the body, and it's the way that you, oh god, I love the way you just described it. And it's something that I don't, I've never done, I've never even heard of it, but there's so many people have never heard of it before, or I clearly probably have never even done it either. And it is, it's almost this another, it's another element of not only healing, but it's another layer of this emotional awareness that I don't think that people take the time to try to practice. I mean, we feel the anger, we feel it, but to associate it with a body part, a color, where is it? And it just brings this new layer of understanding of how we're feeling. And that is incredible to practice. When you're working with certain clients and you feel that a woman is in survival mode, do you notice certain things that happen to the body in survival mode? What does that look like? How can we place it?
Yes, survival mode is so common. And I have my own lived experience of this, and it is quite common amongst most of the older women clients that I get. So anyone
Mhm.
from 30 plus, but often it's even in some of the young women that I have worked with, particularly who have experienced gender-based violence.
Mm.
So one thing that I want to start with saying and answering is, you know, because of our body's response to particular events in our life that may have been quite traumatic, it is a survival response, a coping mechanism to shut down. We might not feel safe enough anymore to be in our body, and that's could be the cause of that disconnection. What somatic therapy advocates for and the philosophy behind it is, when we work with someone, we are working with their whole self. So the body, heart, mind, spirit, they're all interconnected. And having that lens of the very holistic approach, everything is interconnected and complements and contrasts each other. So when we have an experience, yes, we can have a cerebral response and we can analyze it till the cows come home, but the body is storing and having our own response to it. So that's why the somatic lens and bringing in the body when we're expressing something, retelling a story, feeling into how we feel about it. It's not just, oh, I think this, it's how does the body feel? So one of the challenges that we have when we start to work with the body is that the many ways in which we have for years or decades perhaps built up these barriers as coping mechanisms to feel safe enough in the body to really reconnect is where it's really crucial to begin. So one of the things that I talk about a lot in those first initial sessions with clients is what I call anchor points. So what are some anchor points that we can return to regardless of what happens in our session, what we talk about, what is coming up and rising in the body, that no matter what, because they're setting the pace, I'm just holding the space. What is an anchor point that at any moment, if it becomes too much, we need to take a pause, we can return to? So one of those processes is having a somatic touch that they can return to. So this is something that it is them holding or placing their hand on themselves. I don't touch the body. And I'll guide them through a process where maybe they're trialing different places of touch. So that could be, what feels really supportive right now is that your hands cupping your face? Is that your arms holding you in a tight hug? And we play with this. So it could be that the tight squeeze is really comforting to someone, the tight squeeze could be overbearing to someone else. So with my guidance, we're working out what is supportive for that individual woman's body. And this is something that they may not have ever had permission to explore. So, often when we're out somewhere else, maybe someone goes to hug you and it's like, oh, there's that politeness barrier, and it's like, actually, I don't feel like doing that, but we're people pleasers, so we'll allow that to happen. This is a space where they're actually getting permission, maybe for the first time, to explore what is safe touch. Is that light caresses on the body, or is that a really tight, hardened touch? And it's so important for women to be able to explore this safely and have full permission to do that. Because at any time they can say, oh no, that I don't like that one at all. Or actually, it feels really nice right now just to have both of my hands over my belly. That's quite a protective position for us. And so with that feedback, that's where we'll start. And that is where they can always return to. And what I love about this as well is that, yes, they can return to that at any time in our sessions and our work together. But beyond our session, when they're back in the real world, when they're at work, when they're engaging with their partner, with friends, with strangers, at any point they can return to that anchor point. So that hand over the belly, or that hand over their heart, whatever it was that they discovered and recreated for themselves as that safety anchor point, they can return to that. And that is a somatic remembering of, I'm safe, I'm okay here, I'm allowed to take a pause.
Wow. To be reintroduced, or to be introduced maybe for the first time, you said it beautifully, give permission. That has to probably come with a lot of fear, especially if you've never experienced it before, or if you've never, even like you said, gave permission to feel those things, or to experience those things. And I know personally a lot of women, they, even me listening to you describe it sounds powerful, and it sounds really hopeful to me. But for a lot of women, that can maybe feel really scary, and that could feel almost unachievable in a way,
Mm.
because of how facing pain is terrifying. And that maybe certain things could bubble up for them that they didn't know was even there. And when you're in sessions like that, does fear bubble up for them? Does it, do you ever find that it does maybe get overwhelming? And when we feel that fear of facing the pain, how do we embody the emotions, and move through them rather than drown in them?
What's really fascinating is what happens when we are in a safe space, or a safe enough space, where we feel protected and provided for, to go to places that we haven't felt resourced enough to go to before. What I always say with anyone that I work with, whether it's group work or one-on-one work, is that, this is the container that I hold. I give enough information so they know the flow of what we might go through, but that everything that I am guiding us through is invitational. So they have full agency, they get to set the pace. Particularly with one-on-one sessions, it is very much tailored to them and what that feedback is. So when there might be hesitation that comes up, or an unease of, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, even cerebrally, they might have come in and be like, yep, this is where I want to start, but the body is showing something else that's rising to the surface. There is that constant dialogue where I'm like, okay, do we want to go there? What do you feel comfortable with? So there's always that check-in. And so we never go to a place that isn't, that someone doesn't feel comfortable to go to, but also naturally there might be things that rise. And what I encourage is that curiosity lens. So we can also take a step back and be like, okay, how can we meet this with curiosity? How can we meet this with more compassion? um, and making sure that my clients feel resourced and have that capacity to be able to sit with that and be with that. Um, and what's really beautiful is the body is an ally in this. So we bring the body along for that journey. So the body is supporting whatever may rise. And with different processes and practices that I weave in or invite them to do, they're then able to feel more confident over time with doing those practices themselves. So when something does rise, they can be like, oh, okay, can I give myself a moment to really feel this? What does this feeling need right now? Do I need to shake it out? Do I need to brush it off? Can I go a little bit deeper with it and get curious about it? Um, so that agency piece, that permission piece, is really key to not only the value of this work, but what they can feel confident in doing for themselves.
Wow, the healing and the tapping into our emotions is this is on another level. Again, I've never even talked about this before, and it almost brings, like I said before, this layer of hope for people who have never even or have been maybe too afraid to heal or maybe don't even know what healing looks like. This is, I mean, talking to our emotions and really having those moments of self-talk and creating anchors and having the body as an ally and creating this safe space within our bodies to return back to. I want to ask you, because this is such a deep level of healing and connectivity. I and this is a bit of a kind of personal question for you. It's personal for me, but it's a question for you. Um, I have seen someone that I'm close to carry pain their whole life, and it's a trauma that they know is there, that it resides, but they don't remember what that trauma is,
Mm,
and because they don't remember, they don't understand what healing even means. They they also are very resistant to even learn about what healing means, to even understand the different levels and complexities or different resources of healing, because they not only don't understand it, but they are very, very fearful of what will bubble up to the surface because they don't remember. So my question is, how do we heal from trauma that we don't consciously remember? And what is truly the meaning of healing, especially when our wounds aren't visible to
mm.
ourselves?
That is a brilliant question. Wow. A few different things come to mind. I definitely have questioned over the years, like, how much do we need to go back into the story of trauma? And how much do we need to go back into digging up memories and going further and further? Because there's lots of possibilities there of us getting caught in loops and getting stuck in the past. And my query would always be, okay, how is this showing up now? And why is it showing up now? What impact is it having in your body, in your heart, in your view of the world, in your relationships now? Because that can tell us where we need to work. Yeah. So if For example, if we are finding that we have lots of trust issues when it comes to relationships, what's behind that? And what can that tell us about what we may have experienced in the past that we have, for multiple reasons and often good reasons, we've compartmentalized and we've done what we've needed to do to survive. One of the practices that I advocate for when bringing in that somatic lens and bringing in different creative practices and creative ways to express and be with heavy, big, complicated, and uncomfortable memories, emotional states, ways of being, is to bring in other creative avenues for expression. So often with talk therapy, I had about 2 decades of talk therapy before I was introduced to the body practices that I then became a student of and now a practitioner in. And what I found is that in some ways it was good to speak it out loud and have my feelings validated. But in other ways, I found myself ruminating and going round and round in loops. When I and started giving expression to feelings, even if I didn't cognitively understand what was happening, when I was putting things out onto the page, when I was writing and then that turned into poetry, when I was sculpting clay and that felt really good somatically, but then that came out into some sort of, symbol, what that allowed me to do was get really curious about the strength that we can take from our subconscious. So I hold this philosophy and belief that our body and our heart and our mind can all work together to provide us with the wisdom and the resources that we need. And when we are on our healing journey and we recruit different therapists and different friends and different professionals to support that journey, it is about guiding us to be reminded of that power and wisdom within. So when something does rise or when we get curious about it, how can we resource ourselves and support ourselves to feel capable of facing whatever that is, in whatever way it needs to be faced? And that doesn't necessarily mean digging everything up, but that might mean having a space where that rage that we feel every morning, for example, we can physically move that out, we can physically express that, and then we can reflect upon it later. And that reflection is, one of the online courses I have is called Move, Reflect, Create. And so these 3 pillars of, okay, we recognize it, we're aware of something, we can be curious about it, we can give that compassion. How does it want to move? What wants to come through the body with this? And whether that's somatically moving or pouring ourselves out onto the page with paint or with pastels or pencils, and then reflecting on what comes through. So the power of imagery is so amazing. So I've had so many clients not necessarily know what it was that the movement or the sound or the drawing was connected to, but then in that reflection process, it's like, okay, what do you see in that image that's come through? Oh, I see a fire. Okay, and what does that fire? What's curious about that fire to you? What do those flames represent? How do you feel when you look upon those flames? And again, it's leaning into curiosity, and then they make meaning of what has come through their own experience, their own body, their own creation. So in art therapy, we don't interpret, we can be curious and we can, most likely have our own, like, oh, I wonder if that's that. But we don't say that. With our clients, we're like, hey, what does that mean for you? So to one client, that fire could be strength and power and burning away the past. To another client, it might be, oh, that feels like fear and intimidation. So that's why we go in with those curiosity questions rather than interpreting, because we all make meaning of different things. And so, in this way, with the movements that come through their own body, with the symbols that come through their own creations, I'm able to support women to connect with past experiences in new, fresh ways that they might not even necessarily have to name or label or identify, but it's allowing us to be resourced so that it doesn't overtake our whole life and our own sense of self or our whole identity.
That is such a beautiful, soft way of leaning into that healing. And in using creativity, I am very creative, and I tap into all of my creative hobbies, and the way that you say it, of moving it out, whatever that emotion is, moving it out and crafting something and then interpreting on it later. That is, I love that, because it's all this inner work that we're doing, and it's for ourselves, and you just create this space that makes it okay no matter what they put down, no matter what they create, and just interpreting what that means, to name all of these emotions, because sometimes just being able to name or to kind of describe what you're feeling, that validates your feelings, and that is so powerful. And and I am a big practicer of leaning into creativity for healing. And why would you say that creativity is such a powerful doorway to getting back to yourself? And also, some people are always like, I'm not creative, and I can't paint, and I can't sculpt, and I can't do that. Well, this doesn't work for me. So like, what would you say, or how would you advise, or what, other alternatives would you give to someone that feels that way about themselves?
Mm, yes, beautiful. So I love that you also resonate with creative arts as well,
Yeah.
and that's a pathway for you. I know that story. I know that story of, oh, I'm not creative, or I'm not going to try, or I'm not an artist. And, you know, initially I'm like, well, who told you that? Or where did that story start? Where did we take that on? Because I don't think it's yours. And also, who are we comparing ourselves to? It's not about looking a certain way. It's not about the finished product. It is very much about the process. And the way that I have described it in the past is, for me, it's functional meditation. So I really struggle to sit still. As soon as I'm told to sit still and meditate, then I feel like, I want to scratch my knee. I want to like adjust my position.
Yeah.
I can't do it. So for me, if I am, even if I'm, if I'm forced to sit anywhere, if I'm like swaying my body, if I am doodling on a piece of paper, this functional meditation, it creates the same mental state of being present, being with. And it's a doorway to the present moment. It's a doorway. I love what you said about, it's a doorway to connecting with self, because we're able to get really curious about what's going on. And even if we just get some, it's very intimidating to look at a blank piece of paper and be like, oh, where do I start? And again, we can overthink, and we can ruminate, and we can talk ourselves out of it. We're our own worst enemy in a lot of ways. What I always find fascinating, though, is that in every one of my sessions, I always have paper and pastels and pencils there as an invitation. And I have held workshops with women where they're like, oh no, I'm not an artist, I won't be doing that. But after the movement process, when there's that time and really beautiful background music comes on, and I just say, okay, well, there's paper there. So if you feel to, you can continue to explore with your hands on the page. there is no paper left. Everyone attempts it and everyone gets curious. And again, it's really beautiful just to see how it feels to be putting, pastel and just like, because this, the soft pastel, it feels texturally, it's quite beautiful. So what that looks like when you just do some swirls on the page, and that process and practice of giving something a try is something that I always like to encourage. But it's really beautiful as well because we're not necessarily talking about anything in that moment. And, there's always the opportunity to share if people want to, but there are things that can be expressed that we don't have words for, and that a color might represent, or a line might represent, or a shape might represent. And that may come to us in the moment, or it may come days or weeks or months down the track when we're reflecting on it. But I really encourage the creative expressive outlet because we don't know what's inside unless we get curious about it.
Yeah, and it sounds like a really beautiful way to connect to your childlike self in a lot of ways, because I know that when I put those pastels and crayons and paints in front of my babies, they are living. They are, I mean, my office, I have paintings from my kids and my daughters playing around in the paints, and it just creates this whimsical, soft, sort of just creative wonder, and you can just get lost and just enjoy and just be present. And that is so, it's so beautiful because we don't ever really have time to connect to our child self or our adolescent self or teenage self, whatever. And and a lot of times those are the versions of ourselves that need the most healing.
Yes.
And those are the versions of ourselves that we need to hold tight, and we need to, hug a little tighter, and you know give a little grace to, and just be with for a little while. And also in terms of just being creative and writing into poetry and journaling, I've gotten so into just like a journaling ecosystem. I didn't even know that that existed until going online. It's like how you learn something new every day. And I learned about this journal ecosystem, and now I have these beautiful leather trifold journals that hold four different journals. I have a commonplace, I have a doodling, I have stickers, I have my
Beautiful.
letters to, I have letters to God, I have manifesting, I have all these different things because I mean I have all these journals for different things, and they would all kind of be separate, and they felt very misaligned for me. But then I put them all into these beautiful little leather journals that I made myself, and I was like, "Oh, let me just kind of hang out and and it's so healing to just be creative in any form, and in how it shows itself. Whether, I mean, I got into candle making because I was
Mm.
upset that I quit my job. Like I was making candles, and it was just, you do all these wonderful things, and it awakens something in you that you don't know that you needed, that you don't know you were missing out on. And you leaving it there for the people in your class and in your sessions, them gravitating to it, their spirit needs it, their soul just needed to just be creative and be in those pastels and create something beautiful and wonderful. And I love that. I love that so much. And I do that all the time, and my kids do it. I think we all just need to do it, and just to be creative and just sit in our childlike wonder sometimes. And it's very, I think I love that. I love that. That is so beautiful.
There are so many different creative avenues that women can try. And, we've got whether that is they get that creative juice from gardening or cooking or mosaics. Like there's so many different ways. So if you try one thing and that doesn't, it doesn't float your boat, it's not what you're after, try something else. I often have monthly gatherings where we are bringing our own project, but we're all doing it together. So, that person might bring their magazines and they are collaging. Another person might bring paints, and get curious and find your craft for this season and just get playful.
I
Yes.
want to I want to lean into, what does coming home to yourself look like?
Oh, it's such a beautifully unique experience for everybody, every woman. What the journey was for me and what I have seen in the embodied experience and display of women that I've had the privilege to work with, who have trusted me, who I have journeyed alongside, who have taken these practices and made it their own and really grown in this space of beautiful self-compassion, is there is confidence with how they move through the world. There is an assurance of how they speak, how they make decisions. There is a real comfortability with them in their body. You can really tell that they're in their body, they're living embodied. And that comes with this beautiful grace of being able to tune in and listen to the heart and have that ongoing dialogue and curiosity with the body. Um, and a practice of being with self, where we don't look to numb or disconnect anymore, where we are curious about what comes up and we give ourselves grace and compassion with all parts of ourselves, and we welcome all parts of ourselves. This concept of home and feeling home in the body and coming home to ourselves, it feels like a returning to, but it's a returning to a new, fresh version of who we are and who we're becoming. It's a remembering of the power that we have, that we've always had, that maybe we forgot, maybe we ignored, maybe we dismissed, but a really powerful remembering that we are capable, that we are amazing, and that we are good enough in all parts of ourselves, and we don't have to show up in a way that doesn't feel aligned or authentic anymore, because in those spaces that we may have done that previously, they're probably not our people. So
Mm.
when we are able to move through the world in that way, I feel like we also are able to attract the right people and opportunities that are aligned with that. And I have seen that in clients say, when they finally feel like they can say no and they recognize a no in their body, then other opportunities come up for them that are amazing for their work life, that are balms to the soul for their intimate relationship life, that creating happy memories with their children. Like, it's so interesting, the interconnection of when we do come home to ourselves with these practices and we make it a practice. We stay soft and we stay disciplined with it, how that then ripples out to all areas of their life. And it's been quite fascinating to see, and I feel very privileged to walk alongside women who I still get to check in with them even years later, and I'm like, oh wow, I can see you're doing that now. Like, how beautiful that these changes and the ways that they have showed up for themselves have come through in all areas of their life.
That is so powerful, and I'm sure that every time that you connect with them, it fills your cup even more and it invigorates you even more to just keep going and just continue to give this really wonderful and incredible gift that you give to so many women. And would you say that in coming home to ourselves, that we then tap into this sort of inner wisdom that perhaps we felt we lost, or some women don't even maybe feel that they have this inner wisdom within themselves. And when we're leaning into that inner wisdom or that intuitiveness, because as we are relearning, I guess, because we're trusting our bodies and we're living in this embodiment, we're learning to trust our voice again and trust our intuition again. But sometimes that intuition and that inner wisdom, how does that differ from fear? How can we say, no, this is my intuition and I'm right? This is not fear coming back.
What's a very common trajectory of, those initial that initial point where we're like, okay, I can sense something isn't right, so I'm going to go and seek some extra support. And then they may come and see me, and then it's about, creating anchor points for safety so that we can start to work with the body and start to work with the subconscious in this way and through the creative arts. And as they start to come back online, so to speak, and they're like, oh, I've got my body's talking to me. I'm recognizing these signals. There is a inner guidance system that they have access to, and I believe that. I advocate for that. That has been my story, and it's what is very common with the clients that I work with. But that piece that you picked up on of that, oh, hang on, is this my intuition speaking, or is this fear? Is this my inner knowing, or is this my anxiety? And again, it's something that we can bring curiosity to it, and we can play with it, and we can intentionally be with these different parts of ourselves so that we can start to recognize, oh, yes, okay, oh, no, yep, that is my yes right now. And we're going with the information that we have at the time. So that information is not only cerebral, but it is our felt sense when we're like, okay, something isn't right here. And they might not necessarily know what is off, what isn't right, but they feel it. And instead of ignoring it or dismissing it or moving past it like they may have done in the past, they're actually now taking, okay, I'm just going to sit on that for a bit. And maybe I don't have the answer right now in this moment, but as we said earlier, and the beautiful mantra that you shared about, this isn't an emergency. I don't have to make a decision on this right now. I can feel into this a little bit more. I can give myself some time to actually see what is the right decision to make in this moment, maybe tomorrow. So, because we've started opening up those doorways and opening up those portals to reconnect and relearn how our intuition speaks to us, what our body is signaling, and how that can be our wisdom and inner guidance, then we're taking the time to filter through what might be an immediate fear response and might be old anxiety that's still, it's still lingering, it's still within our field, it's still within our system. But what I'm encouraging women to do is take a pause and actually, tune in, try and filter through all of that. And you don't have to make that decision right here and now, where you can feel into it, you can sit on it, you can ask questions and get curious about that anxiety. Okay, what are you protecting me from? What's here that wants to become more known to me? What are you actually trying to say to me? What am I not feeling into or thinking about? What perspective do I need to see in this moment? And I love that, because we can always have this dialogue. We can always access this feedback, and there's wisdom there that as we continue these practices and as women become even more confident with that dialogue, they're able to feel into and connect with more and reap the benefits of that confidence, so that when they do need to make a decision, they can be like, yep, this is the right way to go. or actually no, I've felt into it and that doesn't feel right for me at this time. Thank you.
To make decisions, I mean, I think that in moments of, or I think in seasons of survival, we're very quick and everything is done with this sort of haste, and we kind of go on this autopilot where we don't ever sit with, okay, this is the decision that I have to make. What direction do I want to go in? And especially the year of the fire horse is here, and it is about momentum and making these decisions. I did my whole ritual last night and I feel great about today. I've been waiting for the fire horse year to start, my goodness. But anyway, in in those decisions and in those moments of, anxiety or feeling, or these emotions kind of bubbling, I think it's very natural to make decisions in the patterns that you used to have because it's easy, it's quick, you don't have to deal. But when you're in a season of healing and you're faced with these emotions and things kind of come to the surface of these anxieties and these questions, picking a direction intentionally by sitting with these emotions. I don't think that anyone, it's really easy to talk about sitting with your emotions, but it's really difficult to sit down and just do it. And
Yes.
having, I love the way you said it, having that open dialogue with your emotions. Why do I feel this way? What is maybe the root of why I feel this way? What about this decision triggered this sort of emotion? And having a talk with your emotions is really cool because we have, we talk to ourselves. I talk to myself way too much. But you talk to yourself and you have these, these inner talks, but talking to your emotions and trying to navigate through them, I feel is what sitting with your emotions is. You sit with
Mm,
them, you navigate, and in that navigation, then you can understand more. And now you're not living in survival, but you're living in intention, really, and you're living in in purpose and on purpose. And there's a confidence that comes with that, I think. And and I think a lot of people also, they believe or they mistake this survival autopilot with healing because they don't feel anything,
mm,
because it's sort of numb, because I don't feel it. Maybe I've healed and I've gone through it. And I know so many people that, they feel, oh, I don't care. I'm over it. And, it is what it is and it's gone and that's it. And I think that that's how it's easy to mistake survival with healing because you think you're over it when in fact you've kind of just suppressed it so
yes.
much that now it's just out of sight, out of mind, but it will bubble.
Hmm.
And when we're talking about healing, what can healing give? And sitting with our emotions, talking to our emotions, doing the practices that you have beautifully laid out for all all of the listeners listening to this episode. I'm going to do them. I'm going to do them tomorrow morning. All of the practices that you beautifully have laid out. What does healing give to us that survival and autopilot can never give, and in fact can take away from us?
Mm. I loved listening to you speak just then. That's so beautiful. Healing can provide us with support and resources that we may never have experienced before. Healing can provide us with perspective and avenues for self compassion and ways to be with ourselves where we are actually kind to all of these different parts of ourselves and all of these different experiences that we may have had in the past. Healing can allow us to recognize that we aren't our experiences, that they don't make up and have that kind of power, that we can actually be powerful from this and strive towards and become the woman that we want to be through it all. And that we can learn from all of that life has given us, and we can make changes that are powerful for our growth and everything that we're here to do on this planet. Healing can be infinitely deep and nourishing to our sense of self, our connection with spirit, our relationships, and connection to the wider world around us. And healing can allow us to return to and feel safe enough to be in play and joy and happiness, guilt free, shame free. It can strengthen our sense of self and really allow us to feel deep gratitude for life and all that we are and all that we're here to be.
And I really, I hope that if anyone feels fear around starting the journey of healing, I really hope that after they listen to what you just said, they feel hope and it bubbles in their belly and it rises into their throat, because it is, it's a new, it's a new element of who we are in our foundation of who we are as human beings, and living in survival, living disconnected, living, in phases where we suppress and we let it ferment. It's not healthy. And I
Mm,
think so many women are leaning, or they're yearning for just healing in terms of mental, spiritual, physical, and we just want to live peacefully and softly, but you can't do that without healing yourself. You can't do that without being in tune with yourself. And it's so, I pray to God that after they hear what you just said, that they're like ready to embark on it, because the thing is once you start, it never stops. And I love how you put it, that it's nourishing. It's nourishing for the soul, for the mind, for the spirit, and it's constantly changing the way that we heal and why we're healing, and it's going to be something that we continue to do. It's never, I don't believe healing ever really stops.
mm,
I think we kind of, with each thing that we think we have healed, another layer kind of peels back, and now it's this new thing, and that's the wonder, and that's the beauty of it, I think, to continue to rebuild yourself in these different layers and phases of life. And I thank you, because this was such a beautiful conversation. And it feels like returning home for me. And I because in my personal sort of journey that I've been going through over the last few months, this has resonated with me so much,
mm,
because we think of all the outwardly, you know, um, winnings, achievements, and blessings, but we oftentimes get so wrapped up in all those things that it's, or the future, or what we want and what we desire, that we often forget about the inside, and we often forget that we have to do a check-in with ourselves to make sure that we are healed and aligned and moving intentionally to achieve all these wonderful, great things. But we have to be present. I have to be present for my kids. I have to,
yes.
I have to live and be, a daughter, a sister, a wife. And so it's all about the inner work first, and then it comes outwardly. And I just hope that every woman who listens to this episode, who feels that they're disconnected from their bodies, disconnected from their sense of self, um, I think we all have work to do, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. Uh, I think it's a wonder to work on yourself and to find these really wonderful, beautiful practices of healing and creating safe spaces. And so I thank you for creating this lovely space and sharing your practices, and really just giving us a one-way ticket to come back home.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Kaya, because this, as I said, it's like these conversations, they're so replenishing for me. And the thought and consideration and depth that you brought with your own stories and your own insights and your questions, I so appreciate, because it allowed us to go to those places. And yeah, I feel very nourished. It's really beautiful to be reminded of why this work is important. And very similar to what you just shared, like I am constantly still evolving and growing, and I love that about myself. And I love that I have these practices that I can return to and that hold me steady. And yeah, if anyone is curious about it, to start with that curiosity and just seeing what's there and how do you feel, and getting playful with it.
I love that. Oh my God, I love that. And I think that's the best place to end off. Kathy, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone listening feels nourished and fulfilled and invigorated, because I do. I'm going to go to bed very, very peaceful tonight. I'm going to go to bed happy, fulfilled. My cup is very full. Thank you so much, Kathy. This was wonderful. I appreciate you so much.
It was my pleasure, absolute pleasure.
Conversations like this remind me of something simple but incredibly powerful. You're not broken. You are not lost. You are not beyond healing. You could just be disconnected. And healing is the journey of coming back to your body, your voice, your intuition, and your truth. And to the woman listening, be gentle with yourself. Healing is not linear, but every step back to yourself is a step towards freedom. And be sure that you pick up Kathy's books, Body Wisdom and Heart Wisdom, on her website, intuitiveself.com.au. If you cannot get enough of me the same way I cannot get enough of you, go ahead and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. I do not know what you are waiting for. And be sure to subscribe to us on Spotify and YouTube, where you can watch this episode. I am Kaya Burgos. This is the Latinaly podcast, where we are untamed, uncensored, and always unapologetic. And I'll talk to you next time.